One of the newer additions to our Next Practices Weekly call series is a monthly webinar that is live for global HR leaders to come together. And that is EMEA and APAC based leaders. So go ahead and scan that and register for our upcoming APAC series. Our next call is on June 18th. And then our next EMEA series is on July 17th. So we look forward to seeing you on those calls as well. We're really excited to share our newest piece of research, the team network effect. Zeta is going to be sharing a link there for our members to download this newest report, the I4CP Team Network Effect, How Precision Collaboration Unleashes Productivity, reveals that teams can boost their productivity by an astonishing 39% through improved collaboration. And so if your team is questioning how they might be suffering from collaborative dysfunction, this is an excellent report. Thank you, Zeta, for sharing that link to our call today. For our upcoming Next Practices Weekly call, next week, we have Matt Bean joining us. He is an author and assistant professor at UC Santa Barbara. Coming up after that on June 20th with Demetrius Simrios, who's the CEO, and Scott Peterson, a CEO and EVP, and CHRO, and Carrie Zimmer joining us from Swan's Company. On June 27th, we have RJ Milner, who is the co-chair of I4CP's People Analytics Board and the Chief People Officer at Valuetainment. So make sure that you have our whole call series on your calendar, and we look forward to having you join on future calls. With that, I'm really excited to introduce my call's co-facilitators today, Lori Likens, who's the managing editor and vice president of research here at I4CP, and Eric Davis, who's our creative director and senior editor at I4CP. As we dive into our call series today, we'll be keeping an eye on chat the entire time, so stay engaged and share your questions forward. Lori, Eric, great to have you on the call with us today.
Hi, Nina. Great to see you. Hey, Eric.
Hey, thank you, Nina.
And I'll echo what Nina said. Welcome, everyone, and happy Pride Month. We've been very much looking forward to this conversation today with Christopher and hear about what Krispy Kreme is doing in relation to celebrating Pride 365 days a year, not just 1 month out of the year. But before we get started and introduce Christopher and Ernest, we want to do a quick poll to just get a benchmark of where you are in terms of what is happening in your organizations. Because we all know DE&I work has been on quite the roller coaster ride the last couple of years. So let's get a feel for what's happening in your organization.
All right. So for this poll, we want to know, are your organization's 2024 Pride activities increased, decreased, or the same as in previous years? And we've also got some other poll questions we're going to pop in a little bit later in our discussion, but just to get a feel, let's see. I think we've got 35% that say they've increased, 4% decreased, 51% the majority saying stay the same, and then 9% who are uncertain. So it's great to see that people are leaning in. I mean, that's very encouraging, I feel, with especially with the environment that we're in right now.
And Eric, you know, you work so closely with our Chief Diversity Officer Board and lead all of the research related to that group. Is this pretty much on par? I know there's a lot of members, like almost 50 on that board, but is this pretty much on par with where they are in general?
Yeah, I think it is. And I feel like even compared to where this was maybe even a hot button issue last year, that a lot of them have chosen still to lean in even more this year with their support. And so far, from what we've asked, everything has been going smoothly with most of the Pride events and activities that they've been going forward with.
Great to see. And then we're going to, thank you, Eric. We're going to put a link into the chat. This is available to the public, to everybody. We've been really closely watching for several years corporate behavior in terms of pride and activities and investments and messaging and branding. I don't know if everyone here has heard the term rainbow washing, but we've done a lot of research around this and had a lot of conversations. So here's a piece that we ran last year. I think it's still very relevant. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Christopher, and Nina did a really great job, but I'm going to also ask Christopher to remind me how to properly pronounce your name because I don't want to mangle it. But before we do, I just want to say, great song. We love that. I'd love to hear a little bit about why you chose that song, and what its meaning is for you.
Yeah, so my last name, Bylone van Sandwyk. For those of you who are wondering, the Bylone is my Italian last name, and the van Sandwyk is my husband's last name, who is originally from South Africa, but has a very much a Dutch founding last name. So it's a very much a combination. Our two sons, they got the misery of having a very, very long last name now when they got adopted. So yeah.
It's unique.
Why I chose the song, right? So proud. I think one, it's fitting for Pride Month. If you think about the song, we were chatting before we went live, and Eric and I were reminiscing about hearing the song when we would go to the clubs and the bars, and it would kind of be the kickoff song of the evening. So it's really was the gay anthem of the 80s and 90s. Just dating myself a little bit. But then, it just really kind of speaks to who I am as an individual. I'm very proud about myself and want to live openly. The quote by Maya Angelou is something that has resonated with me for a really long time, because I always think about the legacy that I'm leaving. There's a really great book called Your Leadership Legacy, and it talks about how you shouldn't be working on figuring out what your legacy is when you're writing your retirement speech. You need to be focusing on your legacy the entire length of your career. And so it kind of sums up that I want people to walk away from experiencing me with vibe, right? I want them to, when they hear my name, they feel positivity and feel inclusion. And so how do I do that, right? And so they might forget the words that I said, or they might forget some of the actions that I've done, but they're always going to remember how you made you feel.
Yeah.
You kind of think about, we were talking with some of our interns that we have in the office, and they're working on a donut project, and they were asking, should we worry about the theme or the taste of the donut? And I said, when you go to a prom or you go to a wedding, do you remember what the food was, or do you remember the experience? And so I think that kind of brings it back to that, right? You remember the experience that you were surrounded with.
That's a great point, Christopher, and I completely support that. At the end of every interaction with our colleagues, we ought to be doing our own temperature check. Do I feel like am I feeling more elevated or more diminished, and am I delivering that for my colleagues as well? I know a little bit more probably than most folks about Krispy Kreme graduate school in Charlotte. And one of the things that I think is really cool about Krispy Kreme that I just want to share before I completely hand the mic over to you is that it was founded in Winston-Salem, North Carolina in the 1930s, so in the depths of the Great Depression. And the gentleman who founded Krispy Kreme bought a secret recipe from a French pastry chef in New Orleans. But I just think it's a real testament to, the sustainability of your organization. 80 plus years on, you're still here, made it through the Depression, the war, the pandemic. So I just think that that's a great statement about who you are as an organization. But tell us a little more about Krispy Kreme, and also your career trajectory and how you ended up where you're sitting today.
Yeah, so a little bit more about Krispy Kreme. A lot of people don't know it, but Krispy Kreme is in 40 plus countries.
Oh, wow.
The brand itself, right? So it's truly a global organization. We're 86, 7 years old now. 1937 is when we were founded. and it's interesting because we were Vernon Rudolph. He was making donuts that was delivering it to grocery stores, right? So think about how most people experience Krispy Kreme is going to a Walmart, a Publix, a Kroger, you name it, and you're buying your donut there. That's how we originally started. And then people were walking past the factory that he had, and they were just smelling this beautiful, rich smell, and were knocking on his door and saying, "Want these donuts, like now?" And so he decided to cut a hole in the side of the wall and started selling the donuts right from the factory. And so that's how Krispy Kreme started, and that's the concept of the theater shop and things. So really, really great, and the brand has just grown exponentially over time. My career trajectory. So as a lot of other people out there, my career is very a winding one. I started working on my family farm in New Jersey. I have my bachelor's degree in agriculture science, go figure. However, when I was getting ready to graduate from college, while I was in college, the farm went out of business just for a lot of natural disasters that happened in the late 90s. And I was questioning on whether or not I wanted to go into agriculture, and was finding that the agriculture industry at the time was really homophobic, and I was not being successful. So I really asked myself, is this what I want to do for my career? And the answer was no. And so I decided that I was going to go and work in student activity, student life, and higher education. Went and got a master's degree in higher ed. In the 2010, 2011, coming out of the economy crash of the early 2000s, my job was eliminated through a layoff, and I did a career change in HR. It's always been focused on social justice and trying to create a world that is good for all, and then wound myself doing people analytics. And while I was doing that, I had the opportunity to stand up a diversity, equity, and inclusion office at my former organization, and did that for about 7.5 years. Decided to take a break and trying to figure out where I wanted to go next with my career. And Krispy Kreme called, and it was kind of a match made in heaven. And so now I've just been at Krispy Kreme just over a year now. I get the privilege of being the global head of belonging, first person in the seat at Krispy Kreme in a formal capacity, and really taking this program from what a lot of people did off the side of their desk for many years, right? We had a DE&I committee, people who were really passionate about this work, but this wasn't their full-time job. Right? This was work they were doing because they believed in creating a more inclusive and equitable Krispy Kreme, and were passionate about it. And then they successfully advocated for my role to be created and then getting it filled. And so that's how I got to Krispy Kreme.
Well, kudos to Krispy Kreme for investing in that role, and congratulations, Christopher, for being tapped for this. No pressure, right?
Right.
Wow. Okay, so we know that a lot is happening in the Charlotte area. We know there's a lot happening at Krispy Kreme in the month of June. Can you kind of give us a rundown of all of the activities that you're involved in and supporting?
Yeah, so Krispy Kreme, we're not just supporting the stuff right here in Charlotte. Our team in Dallas just participated in the Dallas Pride Parade this past weekend, which was really successful. We have colleagues in Australia who already had their Mardi Gras back in March. Our team over in the UK is pulling out all the stops and doing some really fantastic things for the month of June. Here in North Carolina, coming up at the end of the month, we're participating in the Winston-Salem Parade. And then in August, Charlotte does their Pride Festival in August.
Got it.
And we are really excited because we are sponsoring the Youth and Family Zone this year. And so really thinking about how we're showing up as a brand. So we're not just walking in the parade, but we're using our corporate dollars and our corporate brand for good. But that's not the only thing. There's actually a really great organization here in Charlotte called Time Out, which is a youth LGBT center, and one of the things they do is they provide services to housing those who are in housing need. And every Friday night, they cook a hot meal or serve a hot meal for homeless youth. And for the pandemic, they were doing it several times a week. But then the pandemic, as all nonprofits, really kind of suffered from a lack of financial assistance, and they had to pare back. And so we are sponsoring their Friday night dinners to help them be able to serve youth that are in housing need throughout Greater Charlotte Metro.
That's really tremendous, Christopher. And I've seen some of the data about the numbers of LGBTQIA youth who experience homelessness. It's really heartbreaking. And just sitting down and having a meal with people who care about you, that's just really meaningful. I just think that's wonderful that you guys do that.
Thanks.
Okay, so how does Krispy Kreme take its dedication, its commitment to inclusion, belonging, pride, from just June to 365 days a year? What is it going on in your culture that really supports and sustains that?
Yeah, so I also wanted to make sure that we're putting this into context, right? So I wanted to first touch on how we approach belonging at Krispy Kreme. Given all of that, we just talked about it at the beginning of the poll, the backlash that is happening in the DEI space, folks who think DEI is a very divisive term, and why belonging, right? So we actually settled on this term when I started a year ago at Krispy Kreme, and we asked ourselves, what are we trying to solve? And we said we really wanted to solve for belonging. So to help simplify the message internally and fit our brand, we decided to pull belonging first. And for my title, we simplified it and said, okay, well, I'll be the head of belonging. But we also wanted to make sure that we did not forget and still work on that we had to create inclusive leaders. We had to diversify our organization. We had to create equitable policies and practices. And importantly, we that it was accessible for all people, right? So yes, for us, belonging is the outcome. Inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility are the inputs to make sure that we have an organization that people know that they belong, not just feel, but know, right? Feeling is one thing, but knowing, you can't take that away from me. It's a fact, I can measure it. So just wanted to make sure that we were setting the context in the right way. And so how are we showing up 365 days a year? Yeah, great brand we have, proud always for the campaign this year. But it's about making sure that we're really looking at it through a intersectional lens. That making sure that we're understanding about how do our policies and practices interact with each other. If we're pulling the lever in gender equality, making sure that we're not having disparate impact in the LGBT space or the disability space. It's, looking at it from a truly that intersectional lens to make sure that you're celebrating it 365 days a year, right? Yes, we get to celebrate Pride in June. Well, in Charlotte, we do it in August. But it's really making sure that we're having that conversation all the time, and not just in the month of June. Showing up, our employee resource groups here at Krispy Kreme are called Assorted Originals, and Assorted Originals for our LGBT group is called Original Pride. And one of the things that we do, not just for Original Pride, but all of our Assorted Original networks, is we have made stickers, and so people can put their stickers on their laptops or water bottles to show significance of what groups they belong to. So it's really about making sure that we're giving people unique opportunities to show their pride, show their community, but also we are encouraging all of our networks to do events together, not just in a particular month.
That's great. Is this visual this nucleus with belonging at the center, is this something that people will see when they're walking around your corporate headquarters? Is it, part of the landscape?
Yeah, so what is really cool is we have digital boards inside of the corporate headquarters, and there's a slide that is in the mix of all the different images that we have. The belonging logo is pretty prominent. I don't know if you can see this, but I have my belonging t-shirt on today. And so which is really cool. Actually, there's probably about 10 of us in the office today that have our belonging shirt on, and I had somebody come up to me and was like, did I miss the memo or something? Like, were we supposed to wear our shirts today? And I was like, nope. It just happens that it's a really popular shirt, right? And so people love to wear it. And so, just kind of, even on days that I don't even wear my belonging shirt, I walk in the office and I just see it kind of around, which is really cool. And just people are inspired to wear it, want to show that they are an active ally to whoever. So that I think it's really cool that it's just an organic way of being at Krispy Kreme.
Absolutely. And, when I see this word belonging, it reminds me of, the last time we spoke, I think I told you I was listening to a podcast and I couldn't remember who it was. And it finally popped into my brain the other night. It was Brene Brown, but she said, the opposite of belonging is fitting in. You shouldn't have to fit in to feel like you belong somewhere. You should just be yourself, be who you are, and just feel like you belong. And I just think that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, one of the things been talking with my talent acquisition colleagues and others about, there's been kind of in the trend of talent acquisition, we would talk about culture fit.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have pressed people to say is, what's the value add? Right? When you talk about culture fit, it's kind of code for like, same, right? Harmonious, right? And so you're going to find people that fit the mold, right? And so if you are talking about what's the value add, what's the culture add that this individual will bring to your organization, you're going to flip the script. And you're probably, just by changing that type of language and that mindset, you're going to diversify your organization really quickly, right? Because you're not finding people, to fit a quote unquote mold, right? And we think about, as AI is coming onto the scene, right? And heavily into talent acquisition, and we talk about success profiles and those things, it is using data.
Yeah.
Right. And so what are we doing to make sure that we are correcting the data set to ensure that the algorithms are not making the talent pool that is showing up to you the same as what the data, it's how are we intentionally ensuring that the data that we're using is not biased, right? And I'm not just talking about gender and race, right? I'm talking about country of origin, LGBT, people with disabilities, socioeconomic class, folks who have a college degree versus don't have a college degree, people who were formerly incarcerated or not formerly incarcerated. So all of those things is all baked into the data, and we have to make sure that we're removing the bias of the data as much as possible.
Yeah. Come as you are, right? You are welcome here. Yeah, I just was reading some research from another organization last week, and there was a data point that really just gave me pause, and that was the number of people in Gen Z who feel like they need to, or they have changed their name, first or last name, either or both, on their resume so that they sound less ethnic, because they feel like their names are really hindering them in the whole, application phase, which just, again, that breaks my heart. And it's something we really need to be aware
Well, and
of.
it's something that's been going on for years, right? This isn't a new concept, right? You talk about, how are we doing blind interviews, blind resume reviews? That conversation has been happening since the 90s. And if we're still talking about it, and still that folks are feeling like their name is causing them to be pushed out of the applicant pool, we're having the wrong conversation. We haven't fixed the system yet. So, we have to what are we doing so we're not in this same generational conversation every single time,
Yep. Absolutely. Gen Z, oh man, we're doing something wrong that Gen Z is feeling that way. So, okay, Eric, I'm going to hand off to you. I think you have another poll loaded up. We want to do a quick benchmark with everybody.
Sure. And first, Christopher, just here. Really appreciate everything you're saying today. So, yeah, this is a question that we first put out last year. This was with our employers and LGBTQ plus legislation study. And we just wanted to get a little longitudinal to see how people are responding now. And then I'll show a few results from that study afterwards. So which of the following statements best describes your organization's position regarding LGBTQ plus issues? We openly support the LGBTQ plus community. We're neutral and have no stated position. We do not openly support the LGBTQ plus community, currently considering or don't know. And we got the question, what do you mean by openly? Displays within the workforce, part of your, do you fly the pride flag at during Pride Month? Do you
Have ERGs, BRGs?
have ERG? Yeah, all of those. We actually break it down a little bit in some of the other questions from that study, and I'll show you one of those. But all right, do we have our results? Okay, and we have 82% say they openly support the LGBTQ plus community, 14% saying they're neutral, 2% saying they're currently considering position, and 2% who say they don't know. This is very similar to some of our results from last year.
Yeah,
But
very.
so let's go ahead and look at some of those. So we had exactly 82% who have inclusion as a stated value in their organization from last year's survey. And then 72% who openly support LGBTQ plus community. Neutral was 22% at the time. And you have to remember we had a lot going on in the media and a lot of public pressure around LGBTQ plus legislation that was flying around in the states here in the US at that point. We do not openly support the LGBTQ plus community, 2%, currently considering 2%, and don't know 3%. So really very similar results from what we saw last year. Let's go to the next slide. And then we saw that 88% of supporters are communicating their commitments through DEI activities such as Pride Month. So how do you communicate your support? And this goes back to kind of like, how do you openly, what do we mean when we say openly support? So communicate commitments to LGBTQ, DE&I activities such as Pride Month, Trans Day of Visibility, corporate equality index participation, etc. Consult with the LGBTQ plus ERGs, BRGs for guidance, which Christopher, I do have some questions for you about how you're working with the ERGs at Krispy Kreme. Hold internal listening sessions specific to the topic, 38% at the time, internally communicating opposition to anti-LGBTQ legislation. This is getting more into the topics that we had for that study. But we had 25% there that do it internally, 18% who publicly communicated opposition to the anti-LGBTQ plus legislation, and then 11% who answered other. So Christopher, I was wondering, how do you work with the LGBTQ plus ERGs at Krispy Kreme when you're putting together not just activities for Pride Month, but throughout the year? How much input do you get from them and how much guidance? And does it go beyond just this? Does it go to like corporate presence in general?
Yeah, so I would say all of the above, right? So they are really our drivers for our Pride Month campaign, right? They are the ones who are deciding on what our Pride Month theme is, right? What our Pride theme is for the year. what it was really great is before I got to Krispy Kreme, we had a healthy set of employee resource groups, Original Pride being one of them, right? So they were started back in 2021, so well before I got to the organization. So our LGBT group is the one who went out and forwarded the relationship with Time Out Youth for the last few years. And was what set us up to be able to become a corporate sponsor of theirs, right? Because we've been volunteering with them. They've invited them to come in to do trainings for us. We would go to their annual gala every year. But what the group said is we want to be more intentional about our involvement. And so, that was driven by them, right? Asking what they wanted. How did they want to interact with folks, right? And so and beyond that, right? Talking about you talked about the Corporate Equality Index for Human Rights Campaign. They have been actively, advocating to participate in that. We're participating in it for the first time this year, right? And I'm asking, I need to be educated on what's going on at Krispy Kreme because I'm still relatively new, still learning what we are doing. I'm reliant on them to educate me of what we're doing and what we're not doing. And when this is going to be our gap analysis here to understand where are we at in far from using the Corporate Quality Index as our benchmark. Well, and when you get the results, Original Pride is going to be at the table talking about how are we going to make the game plan to close the gaps that we identify, right? Also, not just looking at it just in the United States, but how are we doing this on the global stage, right? What are the policies and practices that they're advocating for? This isn't just about, folks coming together, like-minded people and talking about being out at work. This is about how do we evolve our business at Krispy Kreme so that we are the most inclusive and equitable organization we can be, right? And they are at the table bringing up things that we may not know, I may not know, right? As I like to say, when you meet Christopher Bylone as a gay man, you meet one gay man. I am not representative, one, of all gay men, definitely not representative of the entire LGBT communities in which we have. And so I need to make sure that our employees have a seat at the table in advocating for what needs to happen, right? So it's from the policy to the fun, right? Pride is fun, right? This is also need to remember that Pride started as a riot. And so, commemorating the riots of 1969 in Stonewall, New York, right? But this is the fun piece, this is the visibility piece, and so they're involved in every single aspect of how we do not just LGBT equality, but looking at how we are doing racial equity and gender equality, disability inclusion. Our employees are at the table alongside of us, raising the issues that are important to them.
Excellent. Thank you, Christopher. I am going to hand this back to Lori now.
Okay, thanks, Eric. I want to dig more deeply, Christopher, into authenticity. The whole conversation about authenticity and being genuine and what that looks like, especially as we, mentioned earlier, we've got some, retailers who, like clockwork every year will roll out a whole line of rainbow products, but how authentic and genuine is it really? The rainbow washing, I think people are much more aware of it the last couple of years, but how do you differentiate and ensure that the authenticity, the genuineness of your commitment is really, really telegraphed out there?
So I think a couple of things that I would say is our organizations participating in public benchmarks. For example, Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index.
Right.
How are you showing up to the community, right? What are you doing for the community? We have, I don't know if Krispy Kreme will ever do a Pride donut, right? It's an option. It's potentially there. I don't know if we'll ever do that because we have to make sure that is it right for the brand, right? What are we doing? We as one of the other slides that was up, you see a Pride coupon, right? So we give out these coupons and you get a free original glazed donut. To me, that feels like our brand, right? We are generous. We are a generous brand, so we want people to come into our stores and know that Krispy Kreme is there for them. But it's not just about the visible showing up, right? Yes, not every company needs or can participate in a Pride parade. But what are the policies, right? You need to be asking, what policies do people have in place? Are the healthcare benefits inclusive of our transgender colleagues? Are we making sure that we have domestic benefits? Are our health benefits inclusive of those who are in same-sex relationships? Those are the type of things that really get to how an organization shows up and what's meaningful to them, right? And how do companies show up when there's backlash, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it is what I have said to folks here in the organization and advise other colleagues in other companies is do what's right for your brand. If you live your brand every day, then when adversity is there and backlash is there, you can dig deep into your brand and feel comfortable knowing that you made the right decision. But if you're doing something that, especially on a social issue, that is just chasing the green dollar, right? When that starts to be impacted, you're gonna chase the dollar again, right? So think about North Face, right? North Face did a really great example of this where they last year said, we have the outdoors is open to all people, right? That's their brand, right? They are they want the outdoors to be open. And when they had somebody who represented themselves as a drag queen, non-binary, and they got pushback, they said, no, when we say the outdoors is open to all, we mean all, right? And so they dug into their brand. It was authentic to them, right? And so they lived by their values. I'm loving to see what's happening in the chat as I'm saying this. They're like reading my mind, right? But if you live the brand, if you live your brand, you can never go wrong.
Great point, Monique, as well. I saw that. Okay, Christopher, what advice do you have for folks who may be on this call with us today, whose organizations just aren't there yet, maybe even haven't really gotten started in an authentic way? What sorts of things can they do to help really kind of turn that around or get things rolling in a positive way?
I would say start asking questions, right? Starting at the question, why haven't we done this yet? I mean, it is 2024. And also thinking about the ways that it is authentic, right? Meet the organization where it is, right? That was one of the conversations I had with my boss early on in this journey, right? Is that I was coming in as a very seasoned DEI professional, but Krispy Kreme was just the start of our journey, right? And so needing to understand that I need to meet Krispy Kreme where it is. And so think about where your organization is. Rock the boat, right? Ask the tough questions, but don't rock it so much that you're going to capsize it, right? And so, right, because if you capsize the boat, you're not going to be moving forward. Right. Start small. It may be you have to do it informally. Find people who are like-minded to you. Have a pride lunch, right? Kind of do word of mouth and say, hey, we're gonna. If you're an ally, if you're a member of the LGBT community, and we're going to go do, hey, there's drag bingo or there's this pride event, show up as a group and then see what the response is and see what other people are doing. Start small, right? You don't have to, have 100 people marching in the pride parade to make change, right? Ask about policy. What are the behind the scenes things that you need to do? So that's what I would advise, right? Is figuring out where you can make small incremental change that's sustainable, right? If you're disrupting for disruptive sake, right, you're not going to make change. But if you're intentional about the disruption that you do, that's when you're going to have long-lasting change.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about, now that you're a year in, have you hit your 1-year anniversary yet?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago.
So I know you have some colleagues who are on the call today, and I would love to hear from them if they want to get into the chat. But what do you consider, Christopher, to be not necessarily your biggest win in the past year, but what has been most meaningful that you've accomplished in your belonging leadership at Krispy Kreme? And I'd love to know what your colleagues have observed as well.
Well, I think we have a strategy now, right? I think one of the cool things is that we had people who were doing this work off the side of their head, right? They had other full-time jobs that they were doing to make Krispy Kreme Krispy Kreme. And so now that I've been able to come in, this is what I get to wake up every day, log onto my computer, come into the office, and this is my focus, right? And so I think the accomplishment is that the organization is still hungry for it. I think, as I talked about earlier on the call, how many people are wearing the belonging shirts. I know that's a little bit on the performative side, but if you think about igniting, getting people excited and bought into this, it's allowing them to feel the excitement. Seth, thank you so much for the comment. Yeah, we have people who are talking about being a 20-year employee at Krispy Kreme, and because of the work we're doing, they're feeling like they're coming out. I'm having people who are joining the organization say, I've never been comfortable coming out before, and now I can be. We're actually next week, we're participating in an event here in Charlotte with the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, because we're a corporate sponsor with them. How are we talking about racial equity? I'm excited that we rolled out unconscious bias training to the organization for the first time. There's just lots, right? I think there's so much that we can be thankful for. I'm thankful for, actually, this is something that I don't talk about a lot, but is really cool. So when back in July, August last year, I had said to Terry Zinhouse, who is the Chief People Officer, that I wanted to evolve our DEI Council into a global belonging steering committee. And I proposed at the time that Josh Charlesworth, who at the time was the Chief Operating Officer, who is now the CEO, to be the co-chair with me. And the answer was yes. And then a couple months later, the announcement was made that Josh was going to be stepping into the CEO seat come January of this year. So we just changed CEO at the beginning of this year. So I went to Terry and said, hey, Terry, do we need to have a conversation about who's going to co-chair the belonging steering committee with me now that Josh has been named CEO? Without skipping a beat, Terry said no. When you made the request, we knew that Josh was going to be named CEO, and we said yes because he knew he was going to be CEO. And so what was really poignant for me was that there were leaders around me who were taking my recommendations into account into larger things that were happening around me that I didn't know about and should not have known about at the moment, but understood the groundwork and the puzzle pieces that we were putting together. Right? So for me, that was really powerful, knowing that Josh was going to be named the CEO in a short period of time. They were also agreeing that he was going to be also co-chairing. So at the highest level of our organization now, we have our CEO who is personally involved making sure that we have an organization where everybody knows that they belong. That is a big accomplishment for me. Because not many DEI professionals have that privilege, right? I've been talking with a lot of DEI folks, right? They're on the report, in an organizational structure, they are very deep in the organization, right? They're not, reporting to either the Chief People Officer or the CEO, right? They're reporting to a vice president or somewhere further down on the organizational chart. No, I'm at the seat at the table of the leadership of this organization. And a lot of times they don't have a CEO who's personally involved, right? We get that. that's a in my vote, that's a privilege, right? It's an honor, and I don't take that for granted, right? Because I know a lot of my colleagues out there who are doing this work do not have that seat.
That's tremendous. That says it all really about the culture at Krispy Kreme. And Christopher, I don't know if you saw, but there was a comment from Cassandra who referenced the visual cues that are all around and feeling safe walking in the door and feeling safe. That's everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Nina, do we have any comments that we want to share or any questions anyone's asked?
I think, a lot of your team on here, Christopher, is sharing some beautiful stories. And a lot of people just really, really resonating with everything that you have been sharing along the way. I know that there was a question earlier about some of the demographics that you were sharing and whether those publicly are available. And Eric already surfaced the link from Krispy Kreme. But thanks, Lori. I think, I'm hoping you're getting the chance to read these comments that are coming in, Christopher. But really, folks are just resonating so much with everything that you have been saying. So thank you.
So one thing that we've been talking about at I4CP this past week, and I know that you saw this memo from the federal government and the whole Chief Diversity Officer Board at I4CP was sent this, but it was a warning, a safety warning, a be alert warning about LGBTQ pride activities in other parts of the world, that they've got reason to believe that there are some I hate even saying these words, but there are some terrorism risks related to pride events worldwide. How do you digest that news and share that with your colleagues? I mean, it's just such a precarious time that we're in, and it feels even more so because it's been going on for several years. And I just, what are you doing about the messaging with your operations in other countries around the world? And are you customizing any of that messaging?
So one, we're always advocating for be safe, right?
Yeah.
We, right now, still the way Krispy Kreme is organized, we own the equity markets of United States, Canada, Mexico, UK, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan. So we have not rolled out or asking people to participate in Pride or other belonging events in our franchisees. We're just not there yet. However, what I would say is, if we are advising folks, I would say is really focus on what's happening on the ground, right? Understanding if don't force employees to participate. We've had a couple colleagues come to me and say, I really appreciate Krispy Kreme is participating in the Pride Parade. I think I need to take this. I need to sit this one out, and that's okay, yeah. Right? Being mindful, staying vigilant. My past organization that I was with a couple years ago, we were doing an inclusion survey, and we were asking people to do anonymous self-identification. And a couple of the questions was around sexual orientation and gender identity. And that organization operated in 60 countries, and 9 of those countries, there was government-sanctioned homophobia, transphobia. So much so that in 3 of those countries, you could be put to death under law for being LGBTIQ+. And so in those countries, we took the ability in this inclusion survey away to answer that question. But we didn't delete the question. We left the question in. But in the place of being able to answer, we put a statement basically saying, we have deemed it unsafe for you to be able to answer this question in this particular country. However, the policy of our organization is this. And we want you to know that if you are a member of the LGBT community, we have your back, right? And so we were doing this for 2 reasons. One, we wanted to make sure that we were educating our employees worldwide what our policy was. And we want to make sure that our LGBT colleagues knew that if they had a place that they could come feel safe, and we even put our contact information in there, put the email address and say, if you would like to come out to somebody and you have no other way to do it, here's where you can do it. Find a safe way to make that happen, right? And so advising Krispy Kreme to do the same way, right?
Yeah.
Thinking about the ways that we're going to show up authentically to who we are as an organization and not compromise, right? This is who we are, and blatant statement fact, right? It makes me sad that we have to have these notices. However, what I'm thankful for is that we have a government who is actually putting these notices out, right? And highlighting, making sure people are aware so that they can make choices that are going to be the best for them, and that we stay vigilant, right? And so I'm thankful that my current government is thinking about my safety as a gay man. And that's not lost on me.
And I think just the fact that you take that extra step, Christopher, to acknowledge to your employees in other countries, just the act of acknowledgement is so incredibly meaningful. I just don't think we can overemphasize that. So we have just a few minutes left. I want to end this or wrap this up on a really positive high note. I want you to share with us what you mean when you say, be authentic enough to have fun.
You know, I am somebody who I live 10 feet out in front of you, right? You probably know mine before I know it. And I know that being my authentic self is going to save somebody else's life, right? Showing that it will get better, even if you feel like you are in the most like darkest point of your life. There's somebody who is like you who is successful. And so for me, I love who I am, right? I love my family. I have a husband. I have 2 boys that are my world. And, you know, the really fun thing is I get to be in a role that I have my own brand, right? Like, you know, not a lot of people get to have that type of fun, right?
Yep.
Get to work for a fun organization. The end of my week 3 at Krispy Kreme, I was in our Times Square store for 4 hours, and I was just literally handing out original glazed donuts, like just for free, right? And seeing the light on people's faces and light up, you know, and share stories about, you know, oh, my first time with a original glazed donut was this, right? That's just so fun. And being able to share that brand in an inclusive way and show people that, you know, y'all means all, right? You know, and we are here for everyone. You know, it's the time of my life, right? And I get the privilege and the honor of being in the seat that's helping to orchestrate this happening. I can't do this without my colleagues, right? This job is not a job you can do by yourself. And so, you know, for me, every Krispy Kremer has a role to play in making us an authentic, an inclusive brand. And I'm so thankful every day that they are actively engaged and involved, because if they weren't, I probably still wouldn't.
Well, they're lucky to have you, and they're lucky to have the team that you're surrounded by. It's quite a legacy. So congratulations again. It's been a joy to have you today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me and allowing us to share the joy that is Krispy Kreme with everyone, especially during Pride Month, which is really, really great. Hope that we can have these conversations many, many other times on other topics throughout the year.
Same, we will. Nina, hand off to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Thank you again, Christopher. We wanted to make sure that everyone got your SHRM and HRCI credits. So thank you to Zeta for sharing that with everyone today. And you will have the recording for this call available in our follow-up email. Happy Pride, everyone. It was so wonderful to see so many of you on our call today. And thank you again to Christopher, Eric, and Lori for a great call today. We'll see you soon.